Kind regards. Today is Tuesday, June 2, 2026. This is meteorologist Ruben Garcia. Yesterday officially marked the beginning of the hurricane season in the Atlantic region, which extends through November 30th. In today's video, I will be summarizing what we anticipate in terms of tropical cyclone activity. Specifically, I will discuss the factors that suggest this hurricane season may be less active than normal in the Atlantic region. Before we begin, I wanted to remind you that, regardless of how many storms or hurricanes form, it is always important to be prepared because a single hurricane can cause a catastrophe in the area where you live. In addition, I briefly wanted to mention that the first tropical depression of the season has just formed in the eastern Pacific, and it is forecast to strengthen into Tropical Storm Amanda. However, it should maintain a track over the open waters of the Pacific without posing a threat to Central America or Mexico. I would also like to mention that beginning this weekend we will be closely monitoring the area to the south and west of Central America, as there is a possibility of one or two low-pressure systems forming with chances of tropical cyclone development. If you would like to learn more details about this forecast, I invite you to watch the video I recorded yesterday, and starting tomorrow I will continue recording videos to keep you updated. Now then, in the Atlantic Basin there is currently no threat of tropical cyclone development, which is completely normal for the month of June, as it is usually one of the least active months. To briefly review, the next names available on the list would be Tropical Storm Arthur, Tropical Storm Bertha, and Tropical Storm Cristobal. To review a bit of what we have discussed over the past few weeks, let us look at the latest sea surface temperature anomaly update. Remember that yellow and red colors represent warmer than usual temperature anomalies, while blue colors represent below normal temperature anomalies. In general terms, what stands out are the much warmer than normal temperatures that dominate across much of the central and eastern Pacific, which not only indicate the imminent development of El Niño, but also that temperatures to the west and south of Mexico are near record levels. The combination of these warm temperatures with the imminent development and future strengthening of El Niño during the peak of the season means that it is very likely that the eastern Pacific hurricane season will be very active, while on the other hand, it should dramatically reduce tropical cyclone activity in the Atlantic. In addition, it is also noteworthy that from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean Sea we see a band of cooler than normal sea surface temperatures, which would be associated with stable atmospheric conditions and would limit the formation and strengthening of tropical waves emerging from Africa. Later I will discuss in more detail the pattern of temperature anomalies in the North Atlantic and how it should also help reduce tropical cyclone activity. Returning to ENSO conditions, notice that for August, September and October, there is an 85% probability that we will have a strong El Niño event developed, or what many know as a super El Niño, which will definitely have significant impacts on Atlantic activity. Also, notice that in general there is up to a 99% probability that we will have El Niño conditions. Compared to last year, we have the exact opposite situation. First, in the Niño 3.4 region, notice that last year we had below normal sea surface temperatures, close to neutral conditions or La Niña conditions. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic Basin last year we had slightly warmer than normal temperatures. Now, in 2026, we have much warmer temperature anomalies in the Niño 3.4 region and near normal temperatures between the Caribbean and Africa. In particular, notice the sharp contrast in temperature anomalies to the west of Mexico, where in 2025 we had much cooler than normal temperatures, and this year we have much warmer than normal temperatures. The combination of these factors leaves us with conditions opposite to what we saw last year, and it would be logical to think that this hurricane season should be less active than 2025, which was more active than normal. So, remember that the imminent development of El Niño and its strengthening during the peak of the season means that we will have above normal wind shear across the Gulf, the Caribbean Sea, and just east of the Lesser Antilles, which would create unfavorable conditions for cyclone development, or for the strengthening of cyclones moving westward. In fact, if we analyze the latest American model projection over the next 35 days, notice that the Caribbean Sea and the area east of the Lesser Antilles will indeed be dominated by above normal wind shear. This means that the atmosphere is already beginning to respond to the imminent development of El Niño, and it is very likely that this will be the dominant pattern throughout the remainder of the season. Looking more closely at the temperature anomalies, you can see this band of near normal or slightly cooler than normal temperatures extending from the Canary Islands, which is associated with stable and dry air descending from the mid-latitudes and is linked to conditions unfavorable for development. And as if that were not enough, the subtropical Atlantic also maintains above normal temperatures, which can cause changes in tropical circulation, creating subsidence conditions, that is, conditions unfavorable for precipitation, low-pressure systems, and therefore cyclone formation. In fact, on average, from the Caribbean to Africa, In the region we know as the main development region, temperatures are near or slightly above normal. Unlike last year, when we saw significant warming beginning in July, this year temperatures are projected to remain near or slightly above normal. This is also because El Niño creates stronger trade winds from Africa that favor evaporation and cool sea surface temperatures. This is precisely why all seasonal models maintain an Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea with below normal precipitation, represented by the yellow color in this image from the CFS model projection, which for the months of August, September and October maintains drier than normal conditions and may be an indication of reduced tropical cyclone activity. In addition, we see the same thing in the CANCIPS model, particularly between the Caribbean and Africa, with below normal precipitation, as well as in portions of the Western Caribbean Sea and the Southern and Central Gulf. In the case of the North American multimodal projection, notice that virtually the entire main development region shows below normal precipitation. We see the same thing in the European seasonal model projection for the months of August, September, and October, shown in brown, below normal precipitation anomalies. So we have all the indicators pointing toward a much less active than normal season. In fact, most agencies and groups specializing in seasonal forecasting maintain a forecast for below normal activity this year in the North Atlantic. So much so that last week the Tropical Storm Risk Group significantly reduced its projected tropical cyclone activity to only 55 units of accumulated cyclone energy, meaning that few hurricanes and limited intensity are expected. These are definitely good news overall for the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, and the eastern and southern United States. However, this does not mean that storms or hurricanes will not form. On occasion, significant and dangerous hurricanes have developed during El Niño events. Now, briefly, if we look at the long-range outlook over the next 10 days, we will be monitoring a favorable phase of the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which will become established mainly over the eastern Pacific and Central America, and will likely lead to the formation of a Central American gyre, and the possibility of several low-pressure systems developing. However, tropical cyclone formation is much more likely to be favored in the eastern Pacific because of the factors we discussed during this video. Nevertheless, we cannot rule out, as climatology shows, that a low-pressure system could form in the western Caribbean Sea, the central and eastern Gulf, or the southeastern United States. However, once again, the favored area over the next 10 days will be to the south and west of Guatemala, El Salvador, and southern Mexico. Well, that is all for this update on what we can anticipate for this hurricane season. So, to stay informed over the coming months, I invite you to like this video. Also, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so that you receive notifications whenever I record new videos. Well, that is all for this video. Tomorrow I will record an update on the potential development of Tropical Storm Boris in the Eastern Pacific region. So stay tuned to the channel. See you later.